multiple things can be true at the same time, even things that seem to be opposite from each other. College parties can be so much fun, and there can be risk involved in attending parties, particularly those that involve alcohol or substances.
With dialectical thinking, it frees us up a little to really see that these two things that are apparently opposite can both be true, and we can honor both.
Welcome back to the Parenting Pair podcast. I'm Dr. Suzanne Allen.
And I'm Dr. Annalise Karen.
And today we're going to be talking about a really important topic and yet a sensitive topic. And this was a question we received from a mom regarding her teen daughter. And so just a note here, we're going to be talking about sexual assault. And if you are a survivor or have been a victim of sexual assault, we would just encourage you to be thoughtful about listening to this episode and doing it in a way that may feel comfortable to you and able for you to manage that.
Wonderful. Yeah. And we'll be talking about, safety strategies and how to minimize risk and really, I think, have a gentle but important conversation about an important topic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So why don't we get started? I'm going to read the message that this parent wrote us. So she said, while on a college tour with my teenage daughter, we walked past Fraternity Row, and my daughter said to me, "Don't worry, I'm never going to go to a party there." Part of me felt relieved because maybe she'll be safer and it's not something I have to worry about, but part of me wondered, have I done something to make her so fearful? I'm ashamed to admit it, but I even joked, "Oh, that's just in the movies." Immediately, I felt awful and wished I hadn't said that. Sexual assault is really serious, and I am concerned about my daughter's safety. I think I just became nervous about her fear and didn't want her to be so afraid. How do I encourage her to have fun and try new things in college, which might involve parties, while also being real with her about the risks and her own safety?
Yeah. I mean, what an important question. Thank you for the question, because I think we all can have sort of nervous or knee-jerk reactions and moments. And I think there have been plenty of times I've said things that maybe I think back, you can always go back to it. But what I really want to highlight here is, this captures what so many parents feel. She felt relief. Oh my God, I don't have to worry. Like, if she doesn't go to parties, I don't have to worry about that. Right?
Yep.
But then she felt worried at the same time. Like, I don't want my kid not to have a social life or to feel so constrained in the world. And those are big things for a parent. It gets at that we want to control the situation so our children are safe. Mm-hmm. And we can't entirely do that, right?
Which is a very uncomfortable reality to sit with. And I think even your hand gestures here, for those of you not watching and just listening, Annalise kind of put both of her hands out. And I think that that's kind of a perfect intro to how we want to encourage and help parents be able to think about these really tough topics. And that's something called dialectical thinking. And what that means is that many things or multiple things can be true at the same time, even things that seem to be opposite from each other can both be true.
And I think this mom, was having two things be true. She was feeling relieved and worried about the same topic at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So it can be emotions or it can be information that we hold, right? And I think the first, kind of dialectic or multiple truths that this parent is holding is that, number one, college parties or even high school parties can be so much fun. Mm-hmm. And there can be risk involved in attending parties, particularly those that involve alcohol or substances.
Yep. And I love that you said "and," right? Because that means both things are true. When we parents speak to our teenagers or young adult children and say, college parties are great, but you really have to consider that closely because they're very dangerous. It kind of takes away the college parties are great and fun, right? Because the but in there, it kind of erases whatever came before. But with dialectical thinking, it frees us up a little to really see that these two things that are apparently opposite can both be true, and we can honor both, and we can move forward without having one have to, ruin the other, right? They're two things, two things.
Yep. So our first one is college or high school parties can be fun, and there is risk involved in attending those. I would say a second one that's important for parents and college students to also be aware of is that college campuses in the United States tend to be very safe places with very low rates of crime. And the exception to that is sexual assault, unfortunately. And, there are numbers that are pretty unsettling here. For young women, 1 in 5 may experience sexual assault during their time at college. For young men, 1 in 20, and that is likely underreported. And for gender nonconforming or trans students, that number is about 1 in 4.
That's a lot of kids.
Every time I look at that, it's deeply upsetting to me. I think about kind of sitting with a group of friends and thinking, there's 5 of us here at the table.
Right.
When you put that in kind of numbers of looking around you, it's a pretty distressing and upsetting number.
But being willing to look at that and being willing to have the worry that may come with knowing those numbers also allows you to problem solve, to learn about it, to acknowledge it instead of avoid it because of that worry. And I think that's what we're going to try to do today.
Yep. And a lot of colleges have really increasingly over time begun to tackle this issue more and more. I, in the last couple of years, have been on a number of college tours. And one of the things that was most remarkable to me that was very different from my own personal experience was very easy manner on college tours, having tour guides, point out blue lights on campuses, call boxes in which they were, students at any time, day or night, if they felt uncomfortable, were able to call for a ride or help. I've heard from students that during orientation, that there is a lot of information provided about sexual assault, risk factors, how to stay safe, and ways in which they can use resources on the campus and with their peers to help support safety.
Right. And I think that sort of leads us into kind of a third dialectic or a third two things can be true about the same topic. Of course, sexual assault is never the victim's fault, right? So we want to really make that 100% clear, no matter what they're wearing or what they're doing or where they are, it's never their fault. And there are things you can do to minimize your risk. And I think college campuses are much better now at trying to get that information out. But I think even before that, the culture that we create in our homes, even if it's, your child's about to leave for college this week, you can have that conversation in an easy manner way, even if you're nervous about it. But the more that we can do that, the more information that's out there. I think back to, just to make a comparison, when we were growing up, it was the designated driver, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. There was so much public health information out and at the forefront of that really did lead to less drunk driving over time because there was such easy manner about talking about this danger and this risk. And we really want to make that move towards that with sexual assault as well. So parents feel empowered to be able to take what we talk about today, to not be, judgmental or overly focused on the worry piece of this, but that there are things that people can do to help minimize their risk. And it's okay to talk about it.
And just a quick note, because you acknowledged your young, teen may be leaving for school, if they've already left for school, this could be a podcast that you share with them also. So if you're hearing this and panicking and thinking, we didn't talk about this before we left, like you always say, you can circle back. You can send this over to them. It's a short listen, and maybe it's worth them and their dorm mates and friends taking a listen to this. So
let's jump into, we've sort of put it into 5 buckets. I'm sure there are 25 things that you can do, but 5 sort of clear, practices or strategies that, your teen or young adult can do to help minimize risk.
Yep. So number 1, go with friends, make a plan.
Go with friends and have a plan, right? And get out in front of that, right? Just like we used to with the hopefully people still do with designated drivers, decide ahead who you're going to go with, decide ahead how you're going to leave.
Yes. How you're going to leave is an important one, that no one is left behind. 2 people always leave together.
The buddy system worked in kindergarten. The buddy system works in college.
Yep, have a pair.
Because you're keeping your eye on each other.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yep, that's really important. I've heard some of the sororities have done something in the past called a sober sister. And so similar to the designated driver, one person who isn't drinking or using anything during the evening that kind of keeps an extra watchful eye out on the group. And so that might be an idea within your group of friends or your freshman, floor, if you're going out together, who might be willing to be the sober sister and rotate that during evenings with each other.
100%. Of course, not drinking does help. That doesn't stop sexual assault by any means. People can be assaulted any time of day, whether drinking or using recreational drugs or not.
Yes. There is a higher risk when substances are involved. So that's why we're mentioning that.
Right. But if you are a young adult who's drinking, protect your drink. Yes. Never put your drink down.
Strategy number 2.
Yep. So go with friends and have a plan and protect your drink. Never leave it unattended. And kids, they're coming up with, even better ways than we had, Suzanne.
Yes, one fun one. I don't know if this is the official name, but I've had some young women share with me what they call the drink condom. And so it's something that they can put over the top of a bottle or the top of a drink so that it's less easy for someone to be able to put something in it. I've had young people mention that they have brought their own water bottles with kind of flip-top lids or straws.
That's a great idea.
Which is a great idea. There are testing strips that are small and easy to carry with you so that you could put in there. And, things like if you are out at a bar, some of the cans that people drink now, getting those and asking the bartender to not open that so that there's no risk.
Yourself. And just to make this explicit, I think most of our listeners are aware of this given what we're discussing, but some drugs can be colorless and tasteless and can be dropped in your drink by, someone with malintention, someone who, wants to get you a little more drunk or a little more sleepy. And so, young people need to know that. Men and women need to know that this can happen and it can, increase your risk of sexual assault. So we want to protect yourself from that.
Mm-hmm. And this is also where the idea of friends watching out for each other and, a sober friend also comes into play because this can happen very quickly.
Yes.
And there can be very quick and kind of concerning or strange changes in someone. A friend who has had one drink and all of a sudden they're slurring words and appear really out of it. And so just having that awareness and being aware of each other, if your friend has only had one thing and now they're acting this way, that there might be a chance that they've been drugged, and having a plan for what to do, get them out of there safely and get them to, a medical provider to be able to
And I would add to that buddy system and that awareness to have of each other really should follow through the transportation home as well. If you're going to a cab, go together. If you're going to an Uber, go together. Right? So that you have eyes on each other to support each other.
Yep. So go with friends, have a plan, protect your drink. Number 3, trust your gut. Mm-hmm. Trust your gut. If something feels a little off, if someone's jokes are a little off color to you, if they're getting in your space, if just whatever it might be, if something feels strange, trust your gut. And kind of get yourself out of there or let someone else know.
Here's the thing. There's no downside in being wrong, in protecting your safety. So if you're wrong, if your gut was wrong, okay, maybe you left the party a little early or maybe you found your friend or whatever, but better to trust your gut than to question it. Mm-hmm. And I do think in the transition to college, there's a period of time, it's true throughout college, where on average, in that adjustment that adjustment phase in the first, couple months of college, people are more naturally more anxious. They maybe are working to find, friends, and you can second guess yourself. I've heard this from a lot of college students. Oh, I was overthinking, so just I didn't want to offend. Trust your gut. If there's anything that feels questionable or off, protect yourself. You don't have to stay there. You don't have to. And if you're wrong, no one knows.
Yeah. And if you think you offended someone, you could apologize the next day if you realize you were wrong. But
when your gut's off in a situation, really ever, but in a situation where there might be a risk, towards you, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That brings us number 4, communicating and being assertive. And this isn't easy for everyone. And so this is where I would, encourage some practice, beforehand. Because telling someone clearly to please stop or to please take a step back away from me.
Or I don't want to go there.
Yep. I don't want to do that.
Right. I'm not interested. I can't. I'm leaving.
Those can be hard things to say. And this is where a self-defense class, role-playing in your house, role-playing with your friends is a really worthwhile thing to do.
I've got to say, I'm in a community organization in town with where we do service, mothers and daughters together. Anyway, last year with my 14-year-old, we went and did a self-defense class. I am 50 years old. I have never felt so empowered. I have never felt so strong. I've never felt so motivated. And this is not just for women. Men can do self-defense classes as well. But it really, I think people are a little bit scared, or I don't need that, or I don't want to be violent. It is not about that. It's about empowerment and feeling good. And it gave me a lot of information that I didn't have. And I found it just wonderful. I would recommend everyone to at least once take a self-defense class. But I've, worked with young women who've taken, like a course, gone, 4 classes to 6 classes. And it really, it's really empowering.
Yeah, agreed. And this might be something offered at your university, but if not, I 100%
look for them. You can Google this. You can go. I didn't know it was in our town, like right in the center of downtown. Wonderful, empowering places.
Yep. Okay, and then that brings us to our last strategy that can help minimize risk, which is protect your friends.
Which I think we've been talking about, right, to some degree. If someone in your group seems to be at risk, keep an eye out, check in with them, make sure that someone's with them, because we don't. I don't know if it's one of the armed services. We never leave a man behind, or let's
no man left behind.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Yeah. I want to bring up something here that I've had some young men mention to me too when I've brought this up, and this idea of kind of protecting your friends or just protecting people around you. If you notice that there's someone who seems to be in a not great situation or maybe has drank too much. And I've had a number of young men bring up feeling uncomfortable and nervous at times intervening because they have thought something maybe was going wrong, or there was someone kind of passed out on a floor or passed out at a party and they felt nervous about it. But they were also worried that if they got involved and tried to help, that they, someone might be angry with them, but also more importantly, that they might be accused of something themselves, of trying to do something.
That they might be misinterpreted. Right. And that's, it's easy to say, oh, we'll just do it anyway because it's the right thing. But in reality, that's a real fear for a number of people in general, but for men in particular, I think.
To not put yourself at risk for then being accused of something.
And so what can mitigate that? Involve others. Bring other people, bring a safe, trusted person into the fray, right, to help you, reach out to that person or protect that person.
Find her friends, right? Let's all get her in an Uber together. I'll help you carry her, right? Don't go at this kind of alone in assisting.
But don't not assist for fear of that, right? So it's that balance. Involve staff. If you're at a restaurant or a bar, sometimes there's a security guard somewhere. Sometimes there's, just so that you don't have to feel alone or fearful, but you're still keeping an eye out.
Yeah. So let's look out for each other.
I'm glad that you said that. I'm really glad.
Okay, so just to recap, those 5 strategies: go with friends and have a plan, protect your drink, trust your gut, communicate assertively, and protect your friends and people around you.
So I'm imagining for parents listening at this point, we've just given a lot of advice that honestly is helpful for parents to know, but it's also helpful for their young adults to know. So as you said, you can pass this along, but it might leave parents wondering, well, what do I do? Because I'm not there and I'm worried about this happening. What can I do? What I would say is, just like anything, normalize this and begin to talk about it. There are moments. This does not have to be a big lecture. This does not have to be sit down and, say all of these things that may feel overwhelming. But there are news stories. There are things that come up. Maybe a statement's made about, someone that would just allow an interjection of, you know what, I worry about, someone commenting on what that person's wearing, and blaming her. Let's think that through. How can we think of each other? How can we protect each other? there are all sorts of ways that you can just begin to work this into conversation in ways that are helpful.
And the more that we can talk about this openly, the more that we can talk about this in our homes, as children are younger, even outside the realm of sexual assault or abuse, encouraging our kids to be assertive if they don't like something or they don't want something. I've heard this a lot with younger kids, if a family member wants to hug or kiss them and they don't want to, really encouraging your child, oh, they're not comfortable with that, not forcing them to, hug or kiss family members if that's not comfortable for them. So kind of allowing them to set some of those boundaries and encouraging them to communicate that.
And inherently in that example that you just gave, that parent who would encourage and respect their child's wish in that regard is really teaching their child that they respect their opinions and that their opinions are worthy of respect. And I think even when, as parents, we have to have boundaries, we have to have limits, we have to have guidelines, in our homes. But I do think the more that we can facilitate conversations and respect our kids' opinions in all sorts of discussions, the more that kids believe that their opinions matter and that they can speak up and that they'll be heard. And so I think even if you're having a totally unrelated discussion, but you take that extra effort to say, hey, what do you think? Oh, that's an interesting point of view. I'm glad you shared that. It just helps them learn that their opinions matter and they can speak up for themselves. So it can be from the smallest with younger children to more concrete, specific, information for our kids who are, going off to college or going into the working world on their own.
So I think that brings us to what now?
Yeah. And I'd like to circle back to the beginning. Let's watch out for those moments where that dialectical thinking or just allow for the fact that both things can be true. Because when I've talked to parents, really wonderful parents who are good parents, but who are worried about their kids or they think their kids might be in danger, we so often go to control. They can't do it. It's wrong. It's bad. We have to stop them. And I think the more we can sort of hold two things in mind and not just go to the worry side, right? The more effectively we can problem solve. And the more effectively probably our kids will listen to us when we can acknowledge, college parties are fun. And I hope that you're able to, appreciate some of that enjoyment if you're interested. Looking out for those moments.
Yeah, looking out for those moments, having those conversations. I think, I also would put just a quick plug back in for a self-defense course. What now, kind of looking into that, because I think that's a really great way to get this information and have this information shared directly with your teen or your college-age student.
I also just want to acknowledge, based on the statistics that you shared earlier, Suzanne, in this conversation, if you are a parent who has experienced sexual assault yourself, these topics can feel so overwhelming. They can feel so threatening, and sometimes may feel like too much to talk about. And that's okay to acknowledge that. Two things can be true. You can have experienced sexual assault and not feel entirely equipped. Some people feel very empowered and very equipped, but depending upon where they are in their journey with that situation for themselves, if it is too much for you, it's okay. There's so many things in parenting like that, from when they're real little to they're real big, that maybe something isn't something that you can do. You can share this podcast. You can find other resources. You can send them a link to an article. There are ways to get this information out that it doesn't have to come from you. I just think that that's important to know.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, that there are a lot of ways to share this information with young people and help them become more aware of, the risks and the challenges that they may face.
But also all of the wonderful things they're going to do if they're going to college or if they're going into a vacation, the people they'll meet, the ways that they can grow. Both things are true.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, thank you so much for listening today. As always, if you have any feedback on this episode or additional questions, don't hesitate to DM us at The Parenting Pair. In addition, you can email us at hello@theparentingpair.com.
And just as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about what you said about how parents can get this information. I'm going to commit to this now. We're going to put in the show notes a link
great idea.
to a handout for, listing these kind of practical strategies that might be something that you could just go ahead and share with your college student and send right to them with a couple of these ideas in it.
Excellent.
So that'll be in the show notes. Look for that.
And next week, we are going to be jumping into a discussion of when things happen to our kids and teens that sort of feel unfair and how we handle those as a parent, sort of how we manage disappointment or how we respond.
For our teens and then for ourselves.
Yep.
Because we can feel that very deeply as well.
Wonderful. All right, tune in for that.